Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 29th edition of Coffee with Ashish. And today we have a special guest with us, Mr. Sanjay Kumar from Indigo Airlines. And, before we get into conversation with him, I'm sure all of us as travelers, both as consumers as well as people who participate in the travel ecosystem, I think all of us have got a special fascination within the travel community with reference to air travel and airlines, and whether it's in terms of the number of transactions which are done on air, or whether it's just the whole glamour of air travel. I think among all the travel products portfolio, air has been always the most talked about, whether it's about margins or whether it's about even opening up of the travel and tourism. Air always inevitably gets the top priority and mind share in terms of all the travelers as well as in the ecosystem, all the stakeholders. And if we talk about airlines and air travel in general, I remember myself when I was growing up as a kid in the 80s and 90s. Air travel was always a very sought after experience, and not everybody could afford it, and there was a big razzmatazz and glamour around air travel. But come early 2000, we saw the rise of what is now known as LCCs, or low cost carriers, that in many ways democratized the way air travel was consumed, and everybody and anybody could now consume air travel without even giving it a second thought. But when it started, I remember there was a big scare in the minds of people that, oh, these low cost carriers, we would miss out on major amenities, or oh, it'll be like a second class citizen experience, and people had all kinds of apprehensions, myths, and even jokes floating around, which reminds me of, as always, a couple of cartoons which I want to share with you, which used to come at that point in time when people used to relate budget travel. So as you see on the left, where even the oxygen mask has to be activated using paying a credit card. That's how people used to joke about. Some people also equated that the aircraft seating would be changed in a way that some people would sit, or some people would, like a bus, hold a handle and stand. So these kind of myths and apprehensions were there all the while. But I think few airlines, and one of them is represented here today in our show by our guest Sanjay Kumar, which is Indigo Airlines. And I'm sure all of us would agree, and I'm sure all of us have been a customer of Indigo at some point in time in our journey. We all agree that the way they have transformed, the concept of low cost carriers. And I was reading, Sanjay ji, somewhere where you mentioned, and I completely agree with you. So you mentioned somewhere, I was reading that anything which is safe, reliable, and on time is luxury. And I think nothing could be more true than this in today's context. So the definition of luxury, low cost, high cost, full service, I think these have got very different dimensions and meanings in today's time and for millennials. And in at large, if we see, Indigo has also broken the myth. There used to be a joke which we used to read in MBA books, that if you want to be a millionaire, be a billionaire and start a airline business, and you will become a millionaire. That also has been proved completely wrong by the operating model of Indigo, which I was reading by end of last year, pre-COVID, was forecasting almost $100 million in bottom line profit. And Indigo almost has 50% market share. And in terms of the fleet size, by early this year, they had the largest fleet size of more than 250 aircrafts. So I think by any stretch of imagination, it is the facto airline in the country. And our special guest today on the show, Sanjay Kumar, he spent a significant amount of time in the aviation industry. He's a looks young, but he's a veteran. He spent almost 26, 27 years in the trade, and a lot of time was actually spent in Indigo in two shifts. Right? So he used to earlier work in Indigo from 2007 to 18 as the chief commercial officer, and then he diverged out into multiple airlines like Air Asia and others, and then he is now joined back again Indigo Airlines as chief revenue and strategy officer. And he's got extensive experience around different domains of the aviation industry, whether it's about the commercial the commercial aspects of it, leasing, whether it's about business planning, network distribution. So he's at the pulse of the action in terms of how the aviation industry has unfolded over the last 2.5 decades in this country. And in the past, he has also worked with SpiceJet and Air Sahara at various senior leadership positions. So we've got wealth of experience today with us around aviation. And I think with whatever is happening right now, and there are a lot of speculations around how air travel is going to be evolved, how the airlines would revise their route plans, their seating, and whatnot with the revised protocols in place. So I think it will be an interesting discussion to learn from Sanjay ji around future trends of aviation in our country. So with this, a very warm welcome to you, Sanjay ji, on the show. And I'm going to hand it over to Ashish to have a conversation with you while I sit back and enjoy my coffee.
Thank you.
Well, Sanjay, you and I share a little bit of pedigree in the Sahara group. I mean, that bit I know. But having said that, let's hear, how did you get to choose this aviation as a career in the first place?
So thank you, Ashish, and thank you, Karthik, first of all, for giving me opportunity to be here today. How did I get into aviation? Before getting into aviation, if I tell you some fact of my life, you'll all laugh at it. I had not even flown for once even. I had not seen the plane. How does I fly? Other than seeing in the TV or somewhere in the newspapers. The very fact of the matter is, till the time I got into aviation, it was not by design or by choice, but it was by default. I had joined a company called Sahara in the management trainee position there, and they were looking to launch their new airline in mid of 90s, early 90s, and they chose me to be a part of that startup team, and that's how I got into aviation. And I had the luxury of working with some of the big name in the aviation time that time. Harshvardhan, he had just left Vaidu, the chairman and CMD of Vaidu. He used to be on the board of Air India. He used to be on the board of National Airport Authority. So he was a guy who joined Sahara at that time as a project consultant. And I was assigned to be with him, just be his either assistant or secretary or whatever I needed to do. Just be with him. And that's how I got into aviation. In fact, he was my first coach who kind of guided me, coached me. He took me first time to the GC office with him, and I was not having even a proper attire because he said, "You don't have a tie." I said, "No." I said, "I don't wear tie." He said, "Then don't come with me. If next time you come with me for a meeting, come with a tie." So that's how I got into aviation.
Right.
And it was one of the finest exposure in terms of either working with Mr. Harshvardhan or working with different people in Sahara, UK Bose, and Chairman Mr. Sahara himself. So that was the beginning of the aviation, and that company was the best company in terms of learning. All the time we got great example of learning on the job. I think that was the best company to work for, and I'm sure Ashish, you have spent some time there. I think this is the best place as far as learning and development is concerned. Of course, there are few differences of opinion you could have with the management and with the teams around you, but obviously, with sidelining those differences of opinion, that was one of the finest beginning of my career. When I had this great opportunity to be involved with the startup project of Sahara, and of course, then I kind of went through various training and development courses through Mr. Harshvardhan and the company HR, who were kind of going to launch the airline. And at the time of launch of the airline in 1993, I was posted in Bangalore to be the manager coordination for the company, and that gave me a huge exposure in terms of how the station operations happens, how the sales happens, how the marketing happens, and how the ticket and accounting happens. So that was the beginning of the airline career, and from there, working in Bombay, working at Lucknow, various stations, I got a huge exposure. Those 10 years were the best learning for me as far as aviation is concerned. That's how I ended up working there.
I'll endorse that, Sanjay. Even though I came into Sahara when I'd already done 25, 26 years into the travel industry to set up the holiday company. But the amount, the vision I would able to inspire out from Mr. Subrata Roy himself of what scale and vision meant. Uh, Frankly, in my life, that's the first time I saw what it meant. And it got further endorsed from my own personal capacity when I worked very closely with Manoj Modi and Mukesh Ambani in the Reliance Group. So I can safely say I haven't seen vision like the scale of Mukesh Ambani and Subrata Roy than from anyone else. But coming back, of course, to discussions with you. So how have you actually seen the aviation evolve, and what does the future look like? This must be a very well asked question to you in most of the discussion. What do you see the future of it? But let's ask you anyway.
So, we've all seen, Karthik described his understanding and his understanding of low-cost airline business in early 2000. And we all are aware that what were the impressions those days when one of the low-cost airline launched in the country. The quality and the service aspect always was a big question. What Ashish, you are aware, being in the industry, and Karthik, of course, showed some pictures. I mean, there was quality was always a big question mark on the service aspect, of the operation aspect of the low cost airline. I think there where the companies like Indigo made a huge difference, and what we've seen in last 15 years is a reflection of the fact that if you have a plan and if you execute it well, I think there is enough room not only for growth but profitable growth, and that's how the company has demonstrated so far. Coming back to how the situation is today, I mean, I'm sure all of us are aware about 650 planes in the came to a standstill on 25th of March, and nothing could be worse than that. So, if I may describe, a situation effective 25th of March was a disaster. I mean, you cannot even imagine the entire fleet of the entire country is sitting on the ground, and entire traveling population, working population within the airline industry is just kind of waiting for the day to happen. And of course, it took about 2 months time before the government started opening up the flights, and 25th of May was when they opened up about 20% of the flight. I think we saw some great and encouraging news from there. And of course, we had new set of protocols in terms of the safety and health and hygiene for the passengers, not only for the passenger but also for our own employees. Other than that, we also saw new operating processes at the airports, which were largely aimed at ensuring that customers are safe and sound and going through a very, very healthy and hygienic environment when they're flying. I think that is one thing which has happened very well. And I think as a result of that, there are few new learnings for all of us. Today, if in a normal situation, if in India you would have pushed web check-in to your customers, it will take maybe next 5 years before we could get to about 70% of the web check-in percentage of the customers. But here, COVID forced that thing in the marketplace within the first day of the operation when we launched the operation. I think industry as a whole had more than 95% of the passengers traveling with a web check-in with the boarding card in hand. So that's a welcome change. So, situation of course has been bad. We are not overly concerned about the situation going forward. We think that it is going to take some time, but it is certainly going to be back to the original glory of travel, where more than 100 million passengers traveling on a yearly basis. It will take some time, but yes, we have made a beginning with about 20% of capacity on 25th of May, and now which is now moved up to about 35% of the capacity as we speak, and then going forward, if various regulations are kind of removed, we hope that we will shortly be getting to about 45% of the capacity utilization. And just to further add to that, customers are willing to travel. They are willing to travel, and I think everybody talks that there was a pent-up demand for 1 week or 10 days or 15 days. But we have seen is the demand is kind of sustaining itself. Purely now, this is almost eighth week of operation now. Beginning 25th of May. People talked about, there will be pent-up demand. So first 2 weeks are okay, but the third week onward, there will not be no passengers. But we've seen some surprising numbers. Not only the capacity has gone up, but also the number of passengers has gone up as well as the travel. Of course, international is still with the borders, across the borders, and with the various governments, government to government, before we kind of get into the international.
Right.
Domestic, of course, we are quite bullish. Going forward in 3 months' time to 6 months' time, we should be able to kind of get back to pre-COVID levels.
Right. So I'm going to move you away from domestic and Indigo for a bit and more look at the global and see how the other airlines are doing. And you see it. But before I do that, Ashok Fenn, my dear friend from the early 80s when he was with American Express in Calcutta, of course. And he and I happened to be on the same Indigo bus many, many years ago. And that's the day it was announced that Indigo was going to buy 100 planes, I think one plane a month. Kind of situation. And I think it's one of the most embarrassing moments Ashok had with me on the bus because I kept pulling his leg. I said, what the hell are you guys trying to do? And all that. But yes, it turned out to be true again, as far as the Indigo story goes. But let me take you again to the global scene. So that's Indigo. But how do you see the industry as the overall? I mean, you hear doom and gloom. Qantas is doing this. Qantas is not opening this. British Airways has done something. Where do you see it all settling?
So internationally, of course, there will be a lot more complications because the traffic between the borders, when you cross borders, there are a lot more complications. And fortunately for us in India, we have a huge domestic market. So we have some captive market which will kind of go on for many years and many decades to come. So as far as India is concerned, we have no doubt that India, both as a country, as a growing economy, more than one, 100 crore people around us. The traffic is yet to grow. I mean, it may have a short-term impact in the business right now, but overall fundamentals of the economy, of the growth remains intact for India as a not only as a domestic but also as an international business. Now, the people around the world are going through this turmoil on the space. They are largely dependent on the international traffic. They have very little, unlike America. Uh, you know, most of the other countries, if you look at the countries in the Middle East and you look at the countries in Southeast Asia, they're all dependent on the large international traffic across the borders. Whereas in India, we have the advantage of not having that kind of complication that our traffic can only be across the border. Our traffic is more within the borders, much more within the borders compared to any other part. And that's how I think we differentiate ourselves, that we will be in a better position compared to anybody else going forward, as for the traffic is concerned. Now, coming back to the international airlines, of course, they have their own business plan, so I would like to avoid commenting on them. But what I can only say, India as a country, as a aviation market, it may have a short-term view right now. It may have issues, the capacity issue, the cost issues, the losses issues, the funding issues. All the issues are complicated. Right now, it's there. But fundamentally, the fundamental nature of the business is that India will continue to grow about 8 to 10% for many years.
Yeah, looking at the travel, aviation, and tourism in totality, I particularly get very excited about this regional airline, Udan, all that kind of concept. So is there a new way you see as that model emerging going forward?
So I think last 2 3 years, government has done a great job in terms of coming out with this Udan program. And I think you must not take away the credit from them, the way they structured their scheme and the way they kind of, ensure that connectivity is now to a much larger stations compared to what it used to be. Earlier, we used to connect about 70 odd stations across the country in the domestic market. But since the Udan scheme has come in, there will be more than about 40 stations added to the network of air travel. And
Right.
that will be allowed because the scheme, the construct of the scheme which came in, the Udan scheme. So I think government going forward will continue to work with the entire ecosystem of aviation just to make sure that that focus is not lost. And I think that is one area I think we have, if something is started in a small way in one particular market, that thing has to grow big. If a station has seen, if a new station has seen, or new destination has seen some 2 flights a week, if the consistency and the reliability of the product is there, I can only tell you that the 2 will become 4, 4 will become 8, 8 will become 16 flights a week. That is bound to happen. So as a government, I think there is a there will be a huge opportunity for the growth as far as this Udan is concerned. I
Right,
think
right.
government has done
Talking
a great
about
job.
opportunities, yesterday I was listening to Mr. R.S. Sharma, who's the chairman of TRAI, and he made a point that during COVID, internet usage in the country has gone up by 30% across the board. And that's leaving aside the penetration part, how deeply it has penetrated or not. So what do you see the role of online, digital, and technologies which will shape the airline, particularly in India, in times to come post-COVID?
Yeah. So my own view is, and that is a view of the general industry as well. I think digital and online will be a game changer in the entire ecosystem of aviation. You would have seen the new process which I talked about in the opening remarks. When you talk about the new normal, the new process at the airport, 100% web checking. People are now getting used to not only carrying their boarding cards but also carrying their baggage tag, so that they don't have to go to the checking counter and come into contact with the staff there. Similarly, all the ecosystem, whether it is booking, whether it is travel, whether it is post booking, I think digital and the automation and the online technology will play an important role. Customer will want to have less of interface with the airline staff or the airport staff, but more of an automated process. So if I can get my boarding card, uh, I can get my ticket booked on my phone. I can get my boarding card on the phone. I can get all my requests for whatever services through the phone, wherein I don't have to worry about anything. And then with the phone only, I just enter into the airport, enter into the plane, and here I go, pick up my bag from the conveyor and get out of the airport. So I think this is going to be a new normal, wherein technology and digital will play an important role. So online booking, whether it is online booking or web checking, this will become a new normal for us. As I said, before COVID, and I think if you talk to any other airline in the country, they will say, "Oh, my web check-in used to be about 25-30%. Some
Right,
cases it will be 40%, some cases it will be 20%, some cases it will be even 15%.
right.
But now standard is everybody is about 95% web check.
Mm.
So people have quickly adapted by a situation which has been created by not by design but by default, and they are able to kind of make sure that they quickly adapt to the technology. So in terms of the customer handling, marketing, distribution, all the areas of entire ecosystem of the aviation, I think digital and technology will play a huge role in terms of going forward for the future business. Also, the customer experience will also get defined by the digital experience. How smooth is your check-in process on the mobile? How smooth is your, PNR retrieval system on the mobile? How quickly you can get your booking done and quickly get your boarding card? How quickly you can book your access baggage if you need to? How quickly you can access the information about the flight and the bags and stuff. And even post travel, how quickly how efficiently you get a communication from the airline about the new product, new services, and overall new network. So this is going to be a new normal which will unfold over next couple of months' time. The digital and technology will drive the essence of the business, not only for the aviation but the entire ecosystem.
Right. So if you look at the distribution model itself, sometimes I get that the lines are getting so blurred that earlier one only talked about small agent, big agent, B2B, B2C. But if you look at it, suddenly you have these plethora of payment platforms, be it Spice Money, be it Paytm, be it even e-commerce platforms like Amazon. And you suddenly have, of course, Google investing 33,000 crores into Geo, which obviously they haven't invested for the sake of investment. There is going to be a huge e-commerce growth. So that's one model of distribution, if you look at it. The second, of course, is what the OTA, the online space we traditionally know, which to me is now the traditional. All right, there is nothing innovative about that. That's been here to stay. Then there is a third factor, which is of course mushrooming. People who do suddenly realize that technologies and online is the business to be in. So you may be either a startup or you may be a medium size, suddenly scrambling to create an online booking platform. And the goes probably would be giving out, you would have the numbers to know how many such are getting integrated or not getting integrated. Then the fourth, of course, is which we would like to cling on to, which we call offline model. Now, to me, there is nothing known as offline model because everybody is online. It's only a human model It's only a human being doing it versus doing it yourself. And human have the cost. Let's face it, if I was in Nagpur and I was employing 10 people, can I continue to afford to employ 10 people? Will be the question. So therefore, here also I see a hybrid model coming in, that these guys human beings and book it yourself. So I see distinctly 4 distribution models emerging. And to service these distribution models, could be human beings at the other end, be it Kirana stores, be it GeoMart, be it whatever mart, or simply WhatsApp, which may be getting integrated. So what is your reading in the next 2 years on this distribution landscape overall?
Yeah, I think distribution, I'll keep the distribution in general for the trade and then distribution specific for the airline. So, today's situation is such that we see that online travel, whether you call it B2C or B2B or airline.com, they do about 70%, 60 to 70% of the booking right now between 3 channels, which is online channel, I would call it. And the traditional channel, your brick and mortar travel agents are now about 25, 30% of the business there. Now, this shift will further go in favor of the online channel. So I think we would be seeing the shift happening towards our online channel more than what will happen on the offline channel. Now, you talk that's upon the point of some of the new payment system coming in the line, booking hotel booking system. I think this is going to be whosoever has the captive customer and whosoever has the online platform. I think then whether you sell a airline ticket or a hotel inventory or a grocery, I think it's one thing or the same. So it is just enhancing the technology and the entire ecosystem to the user of not only for the airline but also for various other products and services. I think this is going to be the new normal. We will see more and more people. Today, if you talk about Amazon, if you talk about Paytm, everybody's into the and I mean, because they think that they have the captive audience and they have a platform where more and more customer can come in and utilize the platform to book various services. So this is going to be the new normal. There will not be any specialization, which will now be limited to the TMCs and some agencies in the B2B market rather. So this digital and the distribution will go through a chain, basically shifting the focus onto the online platforms, whether the online platforms comes from the B2C or B2B or airline.coms or any other consumer facing platforms.
Right. So finally, before I pass you to Karthik to conclude, my last question: do we see an Indian company becoming Expedia.com?
Sorry, do you see
an Indian entity becoming Expedia.com? In other words, an Indian company going global to that nature.
So I think Indian companies has got a lot of not only advantage of technology, innovation, and focus. It is just a matter of time. We have seen some of the Indian companies already doing very well. I think it's a matter of time that people will get into the Expedias or level of Expedias or Priceline.com. I think it's just a matter of time.
Right. So there is hope for Indian companies to go global on that. Yeah. But thank you, Sanjay. And I'll move you back to Karthik for his conclusion on this. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashish.
Thanks. Sanjay ji, I have more like my own personal question. So, in whatever is happening right now, a lot of my friends and people in my network, they're all now moving towards charter flights. And I know last month Indigo also launched, I mean, for cargo it was there, but for non-cargo, Indigo also launched, charter services. What is your view on the future of charters in India? Do you see a more uptake? Do you see it becoming more affordable? Would it also be through a technology platform where people can just book and they can get group discounts? What do you see the whole future in the near term of the charter business?
So from short term to medium term, the future of the charter will remain as it is. I think we are seeing some great demand, not only from the international market, but not only for the the repatriation flight coming into India, but also people wanting to take flight within domestic market. We've seen a lot of people are going for the charter flight just because of the element of more enhanced safety or enhanced kind of protection for themselves for the family. So this will be also a new situation where whosoever has got the money, they will like to take a flight and take their families on the flight of charter the aircraft. So this business will kind of be better than what it used to be earlier for months to come. I'm sure. I think industry as a whole is banking on this aspect of business quite a lot. But right now, of course, all the airlines have capacity sitting on the ground right now, so they have this advantage. But the question is around having a separate charter operations division. I think the industry is far away from there at this point of time till the time next 2 years, 3 years, situation get back to normal.
Fair enough. So with this, we are at the end of this session now. Thank you so much, Sanjay ji, and thanks Ashish for the session, and thank you our audience for joining in. We will also be publishing key takeaways from this session for everybody's reference, because I'm personally I've learned a lot in this session around aviation and digital distribution. So we'll share that learnings with the broader audience as well. Sanjay ji, thank you so much for joining in, and thanks Ashish. Take care
And
everyone.
Thank you.
Sanjay, let me quickly also comment, you being a true Indigo loyalist, I didn't realize your shirt is Indigo, and streaks of the painting at the back is also Indigo. Good luck to you guys.
Thank you, Ashish. Unfortunately, I cannot change from blue to any other color. Yeah, that's a fact of life.
All right, Sanjay, good to talk
Thank
to
you,
you.
Ashish. Thank you, Karthik, very much. Thank you very much for having
Thanks
me.
everyone. Thanks.